Welcome to Dad's Revenge, where quiet men prove that patience is a strength. Each story here is about a father who is underestimated, disrespected, or betrayed by the very people who should be protecting him, and how that father finds his own way to mend things. Welcome to today's story. The pension check landed in my mailbox on a Tuesday, and by that same Friday, my own son was trying to take it from me. 41 years I turned wrenches for the Greater Cleveland Regional Transit Authority. 41 winters I walked out into the dark before the sun came up, my hands already cracked, my back already aching, to keep the buses of this city running so working people could get where they needed to go. I never asked for a medal. I never asked for a thank you. All I ever wanted was for a man to be allowed to keep what he earned with his own two hands. My name is Samson Holmes, and I am 66 years old. Before I tell you how my son and his wife tried to bury me alive with lies, and how the whole rotten thing came crashing down on their heads inside a courtroom, do me one small favor. If you have ever worked hard for something and watched someone try to snatch it away, hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. Let me know down in the comments where you are watching from tonight. It helps an old man more than you will ever know. That Tuesday would have been my late wife's birthday. Eva, 38 years married, and the cancer took her from me 5 winters ago, slow and cruel, in a quiet room where I held her hand until it went cold in mine. So when my son Jagger called and said the family wanted to take me out to dinner to remember his mother, something in my old chest lifted up. I let myself believe that maybe finally we were going to sit at a table together like a family again. I put on the good shirt Eva bought me the Christmas before she passed. I even shined my shoes at the kitchen table like she used to fuss at me to do. They picked a place called Corky and Lenny's, one of those old delicatessens on the east side that has been feeding this city longer than I have been drawing breath. I got there early. I always get there early. A man who spent his whole life on a time clock does not know how to arrive late. I sat down in the booth by the window, and I watched the snow come down soft under the streetlights, and I ordered myself a cup of black coffee, and I waited. 20 minutes. That is how long they left me sitting there alone on the very night we were supposed to honor the woman who gave my son his life. 20 long minutes watching the ice melt down in the water glass, checking my watch, telling the young waitress, "Just a few more minutes, honey. They are coming. They are on their way." When those two finally pushed through the door, brushing snow off their shoulders and laughing about something between themselves, I understood right away that nobody in that party had come to remember my Eva. Jagger came in first. 37 years old, wearing a soft leather coat that probably cost more than I brought home in a whole month back when I first started at the yard. He would not look me in the eye. He never could when he was up to something, not even as a boy. Behind him came Araceli, my daughter-in-law, and she was wearing that smile of hers. If you have ever known a person who smiles at you while they are already deciding exactly how they mean to use you, then you know the smile I am talking about. It never once reached her eyes. Her eyes were doing arithmetic. They did not hug me. Neither one of them said a single word about Eva's birthday. They just slid into the booth across from me, and before the waitress could even come back around with the menus, Araceli reached into that oversized designer bag she always carried and pulled out a thick folder. She set it down flat on the table, right on top of the placemat, right in the spot where a hot plate of food for a grieving husband should have been sitting. "We are just so glad you came out tonight, Dad," she said. She called me Dad the way some folks call a dog to heel. "Because we have been wanting to sit down and talk to you about something real important. Something that could change everything for this whole family." I looked at that folder. Then I looked over at my son, who was staring down at the salt shaker like it owed him rent money. And I felt that old, cold feeling settle into my gut. The very same one I used to get on a job site. The one that told me a beam was fixin' to give way a full second before anybody else heard it start to groan. Something was wrong at that table. Something was about to break clean in two. I just did not understand yet that the thing about to break was going to be me. Now, what exactly is all this? I asked. I kept both my hands down in my lap. I did not lay a single finger on that folder. Some instinct, older than thinking, told me that the moment my hand touched it, I would somehow be agreeing to a thing I had not yet even heard. Araceli opened it up herself. She flipped it around to face me and slid it across the table. And there in front of me were glossy photographs of a house. Not a home, a house. Big and white and 3 full stories. The kind of place they put in magazines just to make working people feel small. I stared down at those pictures for a long, long moment, and my coffee went cold in the cup. And outside the window the snow kept falling, like it had nowhere better to be. 5 bedrooms, Araceli said, tapping one long polished nail against the photograph. 4 bathrooms, a finished basement. It is out in Solon, in the good school district, perfect for us and for little Adelie. She let that hang in the air. My granddaughter's name dropped onto the table like a coin into a beggar's cup. She knew exactly what that name did to me. It is only $420,000, Dad. A steal, really. But the bank is being difficult about the down payment. I finally understood why my son could not look at me. They need a cosigner, she went on, sliding a heavy silver pen across the table toward my hand. Somebody with assets. Somebody with a pension and savings just sitting there. We already filled in your information. You just have to sign, and we need you to wire the down payment. $180,000. By the end of next week, or we lose the house. I looked at that pen. I looked at my son. And my mind went back 3 years to a night I sat across from this same boy in my own kitchen while he cried like the child he used to be. He had run up $41,000 in gambling debt to men who do not send letters when you do not pay. To save his life, I cashed out a chunk of my savings money I had bled 40 winters for, and I made it go away. I looked him in the eye that night and I said plain as I could, "This is the last time, Jagger. If you ever come to me for money again, you come as a stranger." I pushed the pen back across the table with one finger. No. The word sat there between us like something dead. Araceli's smile fell right off her face, and for just a second I saw the real woman underneath it, and she was not pretty at all. "Excuse me," she said. "I said no." I said it louder the second time, so there would be no confusing it. I am not co-signing a loan for a house you cannot afford. I am not wiring you $180,000 of my retirement. That money feeds me for whatever years I have left, and then whatever is left over goes to that little girl in a way the two of you can never touch. Jagger's head came up at last, his face gone tight and red. "Dad, stop being so stubborn. You have the money. We know you have it. You collected a pension for 40 years and paid off this little house, and you have got savings piling up while your own son rents an apartment. It is embarrassing. You are embarrassing me." "It is not doing nothing, Jagger," I said, and my voice dropped down low the way it does when I am closer to anger than I like to be. "It is keeping me a free man. And I told you 3 years ago that the bank was closed." That was when Araceli slapped her hand flat on the table, hard enough to make the silverware jump, and the couple in the next booth turn their heads. "You selfish old man," she hissed, low and vicious. "You are going to die soon anyway. What are you going to do? Take it into the ground with you? We deserve this. Jagger has put up with you his whole life, and you cannot even do this one thing for your own blood." Put up with me. I've been called a lot of things in 66 years, but there is a special kind of cold that fills a man when he hears his own daughter-in-law wishing him into his grave over a down payment across a table where his dead wife's memory was supposed to be sitting. I set my napkin down beside my cold coffee. I did not shout. Shouting is what they wanted. Shouting is what you do when you have already lost. "I paid for his college," I said, keeping my voice even. "I paid for the truck he wrecked. I paid the lawyer when he got the DUI. I paid off $41,000 to save his life. And now the two of you sit here on my wife's birthday and tell me I owe you a mansion in Solon? I stood up slow, my knees popping, a lifetime of concrete floors reminding me they were still there. I owe you nothing, not one thin dime.
I reached into my pocket, took out a 20 and laid it on the table for my coffee, because I do not walk out on a bill even when the company is poison. But since the two of you have money for a $400,000 house, I said, you can pay for your own supper. I turned and walked toward the door, and I did not look back, not once. But I heard Araceli's voice come after me across that whole restaurant, sharp enough to cut, and every head in the place turned to watch. You are going to regret this, Samson. We are going to get what is ours one way or another. You hear me? You are going to be sorry. I pushed out through the door into the cold. The snow was coming down hard now, stinging my face, and I stood a second on the sidewalk, letting it cool the heat off me. My old sedan sat at the far end of the lot under a dead street lamp. I climbed inside and gripped the wheel with both hands, and I realized my hands were shaking. Not from fear, from grief. Because the boy I raised was gone. Somewhere along the way, a stranger had climbed into his skin, and tonight I had finally watched that stranger look me dead in the eye. Then my phone buzzed in my coat pocket. Once, twice, 3 times. I pulled it out, and there in the glow of the screen was a message from Araceli, sent before I had even gotten the car started. You just made the worst mistake of your life, old man. I did not answer her. I set the phone face down on the passenger seat, started the engine, and let it warm while the wipers pushed the snow off the glass in slow, tired arcs. Then I pulled out onto Chagrin Boulevard and pointed the car home, east and south, toward the little house on the edge of the Buckeye neighborhood where Eva and I had lived for 31 years. The city slid by dark and wet on both sides. The heater rattled the way it always did before it caught, and I let the miles go under me without really seeing them. My phone buzzed twice more against the seat, and I did not look. I already knew the shape of what was coming. When a woman like Araceli tells you that you have made the worst mistake of your life, she is not blowing smoke. She is making a promise. I want to tell you something about that house I was driving home to, because you need to understand it to understand everything that came after. It was nothing to look at. A 2-bedroom bungalow with a sagging porch I kept meaning to fix and never did, aluminum siding the color of weak coffee, a driveway that heaved up every winter. From the street, it looked exactly like the home of a man surviving on a small pension and not much else. And that was fine by me. That was the point. A man who does not flash what he has does not have to spend his life guarding it. But Eva loved that house. She planted the hydrangeas along the front walk with her own hands the first spring we owned it, and every June since, even the June after she died, those bushes came up blue and heavy and full, like she was still out there tending them. I fed those bushes. I raked those leaves. I shoveled that walk at 5 in the morning so the mail carrier would not slip. That house was not a building to me. It was the last place her hands had touched, and I would sooner have burned my own money than let anyone put a lien on it. I pulled into the driveway a little after 9. The porch light was on, the way I always leave it, because Eva used to say a dark house is a lonely thing to come home to. I sat in the cold car a moment after I killed the engine, looking at that yellow light on the snow, until the tightness in my chest let go. Then I went inside and locked the door behind me, and the silence of the house came down around me like it does every night. Usually that silence is a comfort. A man earns his quiet. But that night, it felt heavy, like the air before a storm rolls in off the lake, and I could not shake the feeling that the quiet was not going to last. I hung up my coat. I put the kettle on. And while the water heated, I did the thing I always do when my mind will not settle. I went out to the garage. Now, most men my age, when they retire, they buy a recliner, and they sit down in it, and they wait. Not me. My garage is my church. I have got a workbench out there older than my marriage, pegboard walls hung with every tool a man could name, each one in its place, each one earned. There was a 1972 Chevelle under a canvas tarp that I have been bringing back to life one weekend at a time for 11 years. Eva used to bring me coffee out there and sit on the stool and talk to me while I worked, and I have not moved that stool since she passed. It still sits right where she left it. I ran my hand along the fender of that old Chevelle and thought about my son and about the thing I understood now that I had spent years refusing to see. Jagger never once came out to this garage. Not as a teenager, not as a grown man. I offered 100 times. Come on out, son. Let me show you how a carburetor breathes. Let me put a wrench in your hand. He always had somewhere better to be. He called it greasework, called it beneath him. And somewhere in there, I had failed to teach him the one thing that matters most, which is that a man takes care of what he has. You maintain it. You do not let it rust, and you do not try to strip it for parts while the owner is still standing right there. The kettle started to whistle back inside. I took one last look at Eva's empty stool, and I went in to make my tea. I carried that tea to the kitchen table, and I sat down in the chair I have sat in for 31 years, and I let the warmth of the cup soak into my hands, into those cracked knuckles that had earned every dollar those two wanted to take. I thought about calling Jagger. I even picked up the phone once. But what was there to say to a man who had already decided you were nothing but a locked box he had not yet found the key to? So I set the phone down. I told myself the storm would pass. I told myself that in the morning my boy would call and say he was sorry, the way he used to when he was small and had broken something he could not fix. I was wrong about that, the same way I had been wrong about him for a long, long time. I had just poured the water when my phone lit up on the counter. Not a text this time, an email. The little envelope on the screen, and underneath it a subject line that made the steam stop rising in my throat and the whole warm kitchen go cold around me. Notice of civil action. Holmes versus Holmes. My own name on both sides of the letter V. I set the tea down, I put on my reading glasses, and I opened it. It came from a law firm downtown, one of those names with 3 white men stacked up in a row, a firm that charges by the quarter hour and does not take a case unless somebody is paying. Attached to the email was a document, and I sat there at my kitchen table under the one good light, and I scrolled through it, page by page, and I felt the floor of my life tilt slowly underneath me. Plaintiffs Jagger Holmes and Araceli Holmes. Defendant Samson Holmes. Cause of action, breach of oral contract and unjust enrichment. Amount demanded, $250,000. I read it twice to make sure my old eyes were not playing tricks. They were not. The complaint was a piece of fiction, and I will give the devil his due, it was a well-built one. It claimed that 4 years back, around the time I put in my retirement papers and my full pension and buyout came through, I had sat my son down and made him a promise. A verbal agreement. It called it binding and witnessed. It claimed I had promised Jagger a share of my retirement, $250,000 as payment for years of, and I am quoting the document here, family business consultation and caretaking services rendered. Caretaking services. I set the glasses down on the table and I laughed. It was not a happy sound. It came up out of me dry and hard, and it echoed off the kitchen walls of that empty house. Caretaking. In the 5 years since Eva died, my son had set foot in this house maybe 4 times. In 3 of those, he came to ask for something. He did not check on me when the ice storm knocked the power out and I sat 2 days in the cold. He did not call on my birthday. He did not call on his mother's. The only caretaking that ever happened in this family ran one direction, from my hands into his, for 37 years. And now, here it was, in black and white, flipped upside down and notarized, my whole life turned inside out and handed to a judge. And the consultation. The document said Jagger had provided years of strategic guidance to help me manage my finances and my retirement transition. My son could not balance a checkbook. My son had never once asked me a single question about my pension, except how much and when. But there it was, sworn to, with witnesses listed on the back page. I flipped to it. 2 names, Simon Roberts and Livia Klein. Araceli's mother and father. People who had sat across a table from me exactly 1 time at Jagger and Araceli's wedding, and looked at me the whole night like I had tracked something onto their carpet. They were prepared to swear, under oath, under penalty of perjury, that they had watched me make a promise that never happened, in a room I was never in, about money I never offered. They were not just greedy. Greedy, I could have understood. Greedy is a human thing. This was something colder. They had planned this. You do not draft a 20-page complaint and line up perjured witnesses and file it with the county in the span of a few hours after a dinner. That kind of thing takes weeks, lawyers, meetings. Which meant the mortgage papers Araceli slid across the table at Corky and Lenny's had never really been the plan at all. They were the first offer. And the lawsuit was the second loaded and ready in the chamber before I ever said no. If I signed the mortgage, they owned a piece of me. If I refused, they sued. They had built the trap so that every door led into the same room. I sat back in my chair and I looked around that kitchen. Eva's dish towels still hung on the oven handle. Her handwriting was still on the little chalkboard by the fridge, a grocery list she never got to finish that I had never been able to wipe away. And I thought about all the years I had spent trying to be soft for that boy, trying to buy back a love that a man cannot buy, telling myself that if I just gave a little more, he would come around. Something in me finished right there at that table. Not broke, finished the way a job finishes. Clean. They thought they were dealing with a frightened old man who would write a check to make the shame go away. They thought the sight of my own name on a lawsuit would fold me up like a lawn chair. But they had made one mistake. The same mistake everybody makes who only ever saw the coffee-colored siding and the sagging porch and the old sedan. They forgot who I was. They forgot 41 years of getting up in the dark. They forgot that a man who spends his life keeping broken machines running learns exactly how a thing is put together and exactly where to put the wrench to take it apart. I picked up my phone. It was near 11 at night, but I scrolled to a number I had not called in 2 years, a number belonging to about the only lawyer in this city I ever trusted. A man who had done my closing when I sold my shop and who hated a liar worse than I did. Robert Buck answered on the 3rd ring, his voice thick with sleep. Whoever this is, somebody better be dead. Robert, I said, it is Samson Holmes. My son is suing me for $250,000 and I do not want to settle it. I want to end it. There was a long pause on the line. Then I heard the old lawyer let out a low whistle in the dark. Your own son? Robert said at last, the sleep already gone out of his voice. Lord have mercy. Samson, start at the beginning, and do not leave anything out. So I told him. The dinner, the folder, the mansion in Solon, the down payment and the pen and the word no. The threats in the parking lot and the text before I even started my car. Then I read him the whole complaint, page by page, while the tea went cold beside me. When I finished, Robert was quiet for a moment. Then he said, read me the witness names again. Simon Roberts, Livia Klein, the wife's people, her mother and father. They are going to perjure themselves for their daughter, Robert said, and it was not a question. Which tells me they are afraid of something. People do not risk a felony to help their kid buy a bigger house. They do it to keep their kid out of a hole. I heard a lamp click on somewhere in his house across town. Samson, I'm going to ask you some questions, and I need you to answer them like a client and not like a father. Can you do that? I have been doing that for the last hour, I said. Good. First question. Do you have the money they are asking for? $250,000. Could you write that check tonight if you were fool enough to? I looked out the dark window at the snow still falling under the streetlight. That was a question I had never once said the answer to out loud. Eva had known. Nobody else. I could write it 4 times over, I said quietly, and still not miss a meal. There was a pause on the line, and when Robert spoke again, his voice had changed, gone careful and low. All right, that stays between us for now, but it matters because it tells me why they are so hungry. They think you are a well they can drop a bucket into. Second question, this oral contract. They are claiming this dinner, where you supposedly promised the boy his share. Can you prove you never said it? You cannot prove a thing that never happened, Robert. No, he said, but you can sometimes prove that the man could not have said it, or that the men swearing they heard it are lying about everything else. That is where we live now, Samson, not in what is true, in what we can put in front of a judge. He let that sit. Now, here is the part where I earn my fee. You called me and said you do not want to settle. You said you want to end it. I need you to understand there are 2 very different roads under those words, and once we pick one, there is no turning the truck around. You listening? I am listening. Road 1, Robert said. We play defense. We deny everything. We make them prove their fairy tale. And after a year or 2 of depositions, we win, or win enough that they slink off. It is clean. It is slow. And at the end of it, that boy is still your son. Poorer, angrier, but yours. Some fathers even toss the kid a few dollars to make him go away, and they sleep fine. I said nothing. I waited for the other road. Road 2, he said, his voice dropping another notch. We find out why they need this money so bad, so fast. A lawsuit filed in a few hours with the wife's parents ready to lie under oath. That is not greed, Samson. That is panic. Somebody is drowning, and they are trying to climb out of the water by standing on your head. So we find the water. We find what they are hiding. And we do not just beat the lawsuit. We lay everything they were covering up out in the daylight, where God and the judge and the whole world can see it. The kitchen was very quiet. I could hear my own heart slow and steady, the way it used to get right before I brought a condemned building down into its own footprint. Understand me, Robert went on. Road 2 has a cost. If we dig and there is something to find, your boy may not come out a free man. He may come out a convict. I have seen fathers ask for this and fall apart when the handcuffs came out. So I will ask you plain and think before you answer. When you look at Jagger now, what do you see? I looked at Eva's unfinished grocery list on the little chalkboard by the fridge. I thought about her last night in that hospital bed, and about the thing my son had done in that room, the thing I had never told a living soul, the thing that had killed something in me long before this lawsuit ever came. I will tell you about that night before we are through. But not yet. Some wounds you have to walk up to, slow. I do not see my son anymore, Robert, I said, and my voice did not shake. I buried my son, somewhere I am not ready to talk about yet. What is sitting over in Solon right now, suing me on my dead wife's birthday, is a plaintiff. So you treat him like one. Robert Buck let out a long breath. All right then, he said. Road 2. Be at my office at 8 in the morning. Bring every document you own, every receipt, every bank record, and wear something warm, because you and I are going to be out in the cold a long while. He paused. And Samson, lock your doors. I hung up the phone. I did not sleep. I sat in my chair and listened to the wind come off the lake and rattle the storm windows. And I planned. And somewhere out in the dark, the hours crawled by toward morning. At 7 o'clock, while it was still gray outside, a fist came down hard on my front door. 3 heavy blows that shook the frame. Bam, bam, bam. Nobody knocks like that but the law. I got up and walked down the hallway, my socks quiet on the cold floorboards. Through the frosted glass of the front door, I could see a shape, tall, squared off at the shoulders, a uniform. I opened the door, and the winter came in around my ankles. A young sheriff's deputy stood on my sagging porch, snow settling on the brim of his hat, a manila envelope in his gloved hand wrapped in a clear plastic sleeve against the weather. He looked about the same age Jagger had been when I paid off his first wrecked car, maybe younger. "Samson Holmes," he said. It was not really a question. "That is me," I said, keeping one hand on the doorframe. "You have been served." He held the envelope out and I took it, and it was heavier than paper has any right to be. "Have a good morning, sir." He touched the brim of his hat, turned, and walked back down my icy walk to the cruiser parked at the curb. Its lights were not flashing. It did not need them. In a neighborhood like mine, a sheriff's car sitting out front at 7 in the morning does all the talking a man could ask for. Across the street, the curtain in Miss Delphine's front window twitched, and I saw her gray head duck back behind it. By 9 o'clock, the whole block would know the county had come for Samson Holmes. My son knew exactly what he was doing when he had them serve me at home instead of by mail. He knew how much a good name is worth to a man like me, a man who spent 40 years building one nickel of respect at a time. This was calculated. This was them saying, "We can shame you on your own porch, in front of your neighbors, and there is nothing you can do about it." They did not understand yet that shame only works on a man who still believes he owes you something. I shut the door, I made my coffee, and at 8 o'clock sharp I walked into the downtown office of Robert Buck, carrying 2 banker's boxes so heavy my arms shook, boxes I had spent the sleepless night filling with 40 years of my own life. Robert's office was on the 9th floor of an old stone building on Superior Avenue, the kind of place with radiators that clank and windows that actually open. Robert himself was a big man, near 70, dark-skinned, bald as a river stone, with reading glasses pushed up on his forehead and suspenders holding up trousers that had given up on his waistline years ago. He did not look like a shark. He looked like somebody's uncle. That was exactly why he was so good. Men underestimated Robert Buck their whole way down. He had somebody waiting with him, a lean, quiet man sitting in the corner chair, maybe 50, with wire glasses and the kind of stillness that made you want to sit up straight. He did not smile when I came in. He just looked at me and looked at my 2 heavy boxes, and something in his face approved. "Samson," Robert said, coming around the desk to shake my hand in both of his. "Set those down before you throw your back out. This here is Ramon Hurst. Ramon used to work financial crimes for the Bureau before he got smart and started charging real money. If your daughter-in-law has so much as fibbed on a parking form in the last 10 years, Ramon is going to find it." Ramon stood and shook my hand. His grip was dry and firm. "Mr. Holmes," he said. That was all. A man who did not spend words he did not need to. We sat down, and Robert opened the complaint on his desk and put his glasses on and read it again slow front to back, though I knew he had already read it twice. When he was done, he took the glasses off and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "It is sloppy," he said. "That is the first thing. This was thrown together fast by a firm that bills too much to be this careless. Look here." He turned a page toward me. "They claim this promise was made 4 years ago, but they filed the day you refused the mortgage. 4 years they sat on a $250,000 promise, and then the very afternoon you say no to a house, suddenly they're in a hurry to court no? This is not about a promise. This is about that house. That house was the plan. The lawsuit is what is left when the plan falls apart." He tapped the page. "The question that matters is not, what did you promise? The question is, why do they need $250,000 by the end of the month so bad they would drag their own name through the mud to get it?" "That is my job," Ramon said quietly. Robert nodded. "Ramon is going to pull every thread these 2 have. Bank records, credit tax filings, the wife's employer, every account with either of their names on it. And while he does that, you and I are going to sit here and go through these boxes and we are going to build a wall so high and so true that when they come at it, they break themselves on it." He leaned back and the chair groaned. "But before we spend one more dollar or one more hour, Samson, I need to hear you say it again in the daylight. Stone sober, no anger in your blood. Because last night, a man can say anything." He folded his hands on the desk and looked at me the way a doctor looks at you before he tells you the test came back. "If we do this, and it goes the way I think it is going to go, your son is going to prison. Not maybe, not might. He is going to sit in a cell for years. Are you ready to be the man who put him there?" I did not answer him fast. A man who answers a question like that fast is lying, either to you or to himself. So I sat there in that clanking old office with 40 years of my life in 2 boxes at my feet, and I made myself look straight at it. Then I said, "Robert, I have already been the man who buried my wife. I have already been the man who sat 2 days in a cold, dark house and did not get one phone call from that boy. Prison will not be the worst thing I have carried, and it will not be me who put him there. He put himself there the day he signed his name to a lie about his own daddy. I am just the one who stopped catching him." Robert looked at me a long moment. Then he nodded once slow, and I saw something settle in him too, some last door closing. "All right," he said, "then we go to work." And we did. We spent the next 4 hours at that desk, Robert and me going through those boxes receipt by receipt, while Ramon sat in the corner with a laptop, making calls in a low voice, typing, saying almost nothing. I had kept everything. That is the thing my family never understood about me. They saw an old man who would not throw away a coffee can full of bolts, and they called it clutter. But a man who keeps his records keeps his freedom. Every tax return for 40 years, every pension statement, every bank record from the sale of my little repair shop, the cashier's check stub from the day I made Jagger's gambling debt disappear. $41,000, dated and initialed. I had it all. By noon, Robert had the beginnings of his wall, and I drove home through the gray afternoon feeling for the first time since the folder hit that table like a man standing on solid ground instead of sinking sand. That feeling lasted until I walked in my own front door. My phone was buzzing before I got my coat off, a number I did not know. I let it go. It rang again. Again. On the 4th try, I answered, and there was nobody there, just breathing, and then the line went dead. A minute later, a text came through from the same number. "We know about the money you hid from the IRS in '99. Pay what you owe your son, or the government hears about it." I stood in my kitchen, and I read that twice. And then, God help me, I laughed out loud, alone in that house. 1999. I had been audited in '99. Some computer down in Columbus flagged my little shop, and a humorless woman came out and went through my books for 3 days. And at the end of it, the state of Ohio wrote me a check for $411. They had overcharged me. That was my great tax crime. They were not even shooting real bullets. They were throwing rocks in the dark, hoping something would break a window. But the phone was not done. It buzzed again while it was still in my hand. This time, it was the bank, an alert. Attempted login on my primary savings account. Incorrect password entered 3 times. Account temporarily locked. That one I did not laugh at, because I knew where they had gotten close enough to guess. Years back, when I was still fighting with computers the way a man fights a wasp in the car, Jagger had set up my online banking for me. He had watched me type. He knew my habits, the old passwords I recycled, my mother's maiden name, the street we lived on when he was a boy. He was in there right now, or trying to be, reaching his hand into the account that held the last of what Eva and I had saved together. I did not panic. Panic is a luxury for people with time. I picked up the phone I called the bank's fraud line, and I sat on hold listening to soft jazz for 26 minutes.
And when a human finally came on, I froze every account I had. New passwords, two-step verification, a verbal code word only I would know. I chose Eva's middle name, the one nobody outside our marriage ever knew. Let them guess at that one.
When I hung up, the house had gone dark around me. I had not noticed the afternoon bleeding out of the sky. I had sat there through the whole call without turning on a single light, and now the street lamp outside threw its pale yellow across the kitchen table, where Eva's dish towels still hung, and where her unfinished grocery list still waited on the little chalkboard for a hand that was never coming back to finish it. I sat there in the gloom of my own kitchen, and I understood something with a cold clarity that surprised me. Robert had been right. This was not greed. Greedy people are patient. Greedy people wait for the will to be read. What was coming at me now? The fake tax threat, the hand in my bank account, the lawsuit filed in a matter of hours. This was not the behavior of people who wanted my money someday. This was the behavior of people who needed it right now, this month, this week, and were terrified of what happened if they did not get it.
Something was chasing them, and they were trying to feed it my life.
My phone lit up one more time in the dark, but this time the name on the screen was Ramon Hurst, and when I answered, the quiet man did not bother with hello. "Mr. Holmes," he said, "I need you back at Robert's office first thing tomorrow. I found what is chasing them, and I am telling you right now, this was never about a house." I was at Robert's office by 8 the next morning, and the mood in that room had changed overnight. Robert was not behind his desk. He was standing at the window with his arms crossed, watching the snow come down on Superior Avenue. Ramon sat in the same corner chair, but now there was a thin blue folder on the desk in front of him, closed, squared up neat with the edge of the wood. Something about the way it sat there made the back of my neck go cold. "Sit down, Samson," Robert said, not turning around. I sat. Ramon opened the folder and turned it so I could see. The first page was a printout, a company logo at the top, clean and modern, Meridian Wealth Partners. Underneath it, a photograph of my daughter-in-law in a gray suit, smiling that same smile next to the words, Senior Financial Advisor. "You knew she worked in money," Ramon said. It was not a question, but I answered anyway. She never let anybody forget it, always going on about her important clients. Looked down her nose at me for turning wrenches. Ramon nodded like that fit something. "She manages retirement accounts, older clients mostly, people who trusted her with everything they had saved." He turned a page. Now it was a spreadsheet, columns of dates and dollar figures, some of them circled in red. About 8 months ago, Araceli started moving money that was not hers. Small at first, a withdrawal here, a transfer there, always from the accounts of her oldest clients, the ones least likely to check a statement or understand it if they did. She would move it into a holding account, then out again into accounts she controlled. I looked at the red circles. There were a lot of them. "How much?" I said. My voice came out lower than I meant it to. Ramon turned one more page and let it sit there. As of last week, $215,000. The number landed in the middle of that quiet office and just sat there. $215,000. Stolen. From old people. From folks like me folks who got up in the dark their whole lives and handed the last of it to a woman with a nice suit and a good smile because they trusted her to keep it safe. "She has been stealing from her own clients," I said slowly, working it through. "Old people. People my age. People exactly your age," Ramon said. "That is not an accident. She picks the ones who will not catch it." He closed the folder halfway and looked at me over his wire glasses. "But here's why it is all coming apart right now, Mr. Holmes, and why they came at you so hard, so fast. Meridian just got bought by a bigger outfit out of Chicago. Part of any acquisition like that is a full outside audit. Independent accountants going through every account line by line, matching every dollar to every client." He paused. "That audit starts the 1st of next month, 9 days from now." And there it was, the whole ugly machine,
laid out on the desk in front of me, every gear finally showing. "She needs to put it back," I said, "before they open the books. 215,000, plus the fees she has skimmed, plus a cushion." Robert had turned from the window now, and his voice was grim. "That is your $250,000, Samson. That is the exact number in that lawsuit. It is not a random figure, it is a debt. She does the math on what she stole and what she needs to make herself whole before that audit, and it comes to 250,000. And then she sits down and files a lawsuit against her father-in-law for the precise same amount." He shook his head slow. "That house in Solon was never a house. It was a laundry. Buy the property, put your name on the mortgage, take a home equity line against it, pull the cash out, clean, put it back in the client accounts, and pray the auditors never look close. When you said no to the house, you did not just deny them a place to live. You kicked away the last ladder they had. So now they need the cash straight from you, and the lawsuit is the only pipe left to run it through." I sat there and I let it all settle. And I felt something I had not expected. Not anger, not yet. Grief again. Because I was thinking about those clients, I would never meet the old men and old women who had shaken her hand and signed their life savings over to her, and gone home believing they had done a smart, safe thing. I thought about how one of them might be sitting in a kitchen right now, same as mine, doing the arithmetic on how many years he had left, and how far his money would stretch. Not knowing the number was already a lie, already bled out by a woman with a good suit and a cold pair of eyes, doing math. "Ramon," I said, "my son, Jagger, does he know what she did, or is my boy just a fool who married a thief?" Ramon did not say a word. He reached into the folder, pulled out one last sheet of paper, and slid it across the desk to me. It was a bank signature card. An account opened under the name of one of those holding companies she had run the money through. And there at the bottom, on the line marked Authorized Signatory, in handwriting I had watched form its first shaky letters at my own kitchen table 30 years ago, was my son's name. Jagger Holmes. I stared at that name for a long time. My son's name, in my son's hand, on a thief's account. I had wanted so bad for the answer to be that Jagger was a fool, a weak man led around by a wicked woman. There is grace a father can find in that. A fool can be pitied. A fool can maybe someday be forgiven. But you do not put your signature on a laundering account by accident. You do not stumble into it. My boy had signed his name careful and deliberate on the very machine that was bleeding old people dry. And then he had come to his own father's table and demanded I fund it. And when I said no, he had signed his name to a second lie to take it from me by force. "He is on 4 of the shell accounts," Ramon said quietly, watching my face. "Not 1, 4. He is not a bystander, Mr. Holmes. He moved money. He knew." He let a beat pass. "I am sorry to be the one to lay it in front of you like that." "Do not be sorry," I said. My voice was steady, which surprised me. "You did not put his name there. He did." Robert came back to his desk and lowered himself into his chair. "There is more," he said, "and it changes how fast we have to move." He nodded at Ramon. Ramon turned to a fresh page in a notebook, the kind of small spiral pad a careful man keeps. 2 days ago, Araceli made a phone call from her cell to a travel agency in Beechwood. I have the record, not the content, but the agency specializes in one thing: international relocation. And yesterday, she pulled both passports, hers and your son's, from a safe deposit box at their bank. He looked up. People do not renew their passports and call relocation specialists the same week their audit is announced, because they are planning a vacation, Mr. Holmes. They are building an exit. The room went quiet again, except for the radiator ticking against the cold. So there it was, the whole shape of it. They had stolen from the old and the trusting. They had gotten caught by a calendar they could not stop. They had tried to launder my house into a solution, and failed. They had tried to sue the money straight out of me, and now, with 9 days on the clock, they were keeping a back door propped open,
a flight to some country that would not send them home, in case every other plan came up short.
And my son was going to get on that plane. That was the thing I kept coming back to. My son, who I taught to ride a bike on Larchmere Boulevard, who I carried on my shoulders through the West Side Market, was ready to fly to the far side of the world and leave his own daughter behind, leave little Adelie, rather than face what he had done.
I thought about Adelie then, 4 years old with her grandmother's eyes. If those two ran, or if those two went to prison, where did that leave her? That question put a crack right through all my cold resolve, and Robert must have seen it on my face. "We will deal with the child," he said gently. "There are ways. But right now, I need your head clear, Samson, because we have a decision to make, and not much time to make it." He folded his hands. "We could end this today, right now. Ramon takes what he has got to the U.S. Attorney's Office, the state securities people, the Bureau. By tonight, there are warrants. By tomorrow morning, your son and his wife are both in handcuffs.
And the lawsuit dies on the vine because you cannot sue a man from a holding cell.
It was a real offer. I sat with it. I imagined the phone call, the arrest, the whole thing over by breakfast. "But," I said, because I could hear the but coming. "But," Robert agreed, "if we do it that way, the lawsuit is still a live thing when the arrests happen. It gets messy, tangled up in the criminal case. It drags, and worse than that." He leaned forward. "Worse than that, Samson, you never get your day. They never have to sit across a courtroom from you and look you in the eye. They just vanish into the system, and you are left standing in your kitchen, wondering if it is really finished. Some men need that. Some men need to see the thing done in the light with their own eyes, so the ghost never comes back to visit them at night." "What are you telling me to do?" I said. Robert Buck smiled then, and it was not a warm smile. It was the smile of an old lawyer who had waited a long time for a case this clean. "I am telling you we hold it," he said. "We keep everything Ramon has got locked in this office, and we say nothing. We let them believe they are winning. We let them walk right up the courthouse steps, sure they have got a scared old man on the ropes. We let them raise their right hands and swear to their lies under oath, on the record in front of a judge. And then, Samson, when they are all the way out on the limb, we take the saw to it." I looked at the signature card one more time. My boy's name. And I thought about a night 5 years back in a hospital room that I had still not told anybody about. "They are not going to run before then?" I asked. "Not without the money," Ramon said. "They cannot start a new life on empty pockets in a country they do not know. They will stay right where they are and keep reaching for your throat, because you are the only bank left that has not locked its doors." He closed his notebook. "They are not going anywhere, Mr. Holmes. They are going to court." The war did not stay downtown in Robert's office. It followed me home, and it crawled into my phone, and it went to work on the one thing I had left that they could still poison: my good name. Robert had warned me it would come. When people cannot break a man with money or with lawyers, he said, they try to break him with shame. They try to turn his own community against him so he stands alone, so there is nobody left to tell him he is right. That is exactly what they did. It started on a Thursday evening. I was in my chair with a cup of coffee and the television turned down low, watching the snow build up on the sill, when my phone lit up with something I had not seen in years. A notice from that social media site, the one Eva used to like for the church photos. "You have been tagged in a post by Araceli Holmes." I put on my glasses and I opened it, and my stomach turned over. It was a photograph of the two of them, Jagger and Araceli, sitting close together on a couch, looking tired and tearful, holding hands. Somebody had lit it soft. Underneath was a wall of words, and I made myself read every one. "It breaks our hearts to share this," she had written, "but we can no longer stay silent. For years we have tried to have a relationship with Jagger's father, Samson Holmes. We have tried, with love. But some of you know how hard it has been. Now we are about to lose our home and our little girl's future because this man made a promise to his only son and chose his money over his own blood. We are not asking for charity. We are asking for justice and for prayers. Please keep our family in your hearts as we face a man who has forgotten what family means. And underneath that, the little tags glowing: elder greed, broken promises, pray for us. I sat there in the blue light of that screen and I watched the things spread in real time. The comments came in, one after another, and they were from people I knew, people from the neighborhood, people from Mount Zion, my own church folks I had passed the collection plate to for 20 years. I never would have believed it of Samson, one wrote. You never really know a person. Stay strong, baby, wrote another. God sees everything. Shame on him doing his own son like that. Each one landed on me like a small stone. Not because I cared what a screen said, but because I could put a face to every name, could see them in their pews, could remember carrying a casserole to that woman's door when her husband passed. And now, here they were, lining up to grieve for the two people robbing old folks blind because a pretty photograph and a paragraph of lies had gotten to them first. That is the cruelty of it. A lie travels the whole neighborhood before the truth gets its boots on. And they knew that. Araceli knew exactly what she was doing. Cut the old bull off from the herd, make him stand alone in the cold. A man alone is a man who folds. Then the phone rang in my hand, and the name on it was Joelle Richardson, Eva's baby sister, my sister-in-law. We had not spoken more than 3 times since the funeral, but she was calling me now at 9 o'clock at night, and when I answered, her voice came at me sharp and shaking. Samson, I just saw Araceli's post. Tell me it is not true. Tell me you are not doing this to that boy. Joelle, I said, keeping my voice low and even. You do not know what is happening here. There is a great deal you do not know. I know family is supposed to help family, she snapped. I know that girl is crying on the internet, and my nephew is about to lose his house. I know Eva would be ashamed of you, Samson. Ashamed. And there it was, the one blade sharp enough to actually reach me. She had reached past all my armor and picked up my dead wife and swung her at my head. I closed my eyes. I took a slow breath, the kind Eva taught me to take before I said a thing I could not take back. Do not, I said quietly, ever use her against me again. You did not sit in that hospital room, Joelle. You do not know what that boy did. So you keep Eva's name out of your mouth until you do. The line went quiet. Then it clicked dead. She had hung up on me. I set the phone down on the arm of the chair. My hand was steady, but there was a cold fury moving through me, now colder than anything I had felt at that dinner table. They were not just after my money anymore. They were digging up my wife to do it. I did not answer the post. I did not call Joelle back. I remembered what Robert told me. Do not defend yourself. Let them dig. Every lie they tell in public is a lie we can lay next to the truth in that courtroom. So instead of arguing, I did something else. I opened the screen back up, and one by one I took a picture of every post, every comment, every timestamp, and I sent the whole ugly collection down to Ramon Hurst with 3 words. For the file. Then I turned off the lamp and sat in the dark of my own living room. And I was still sitting there an hour later when a pair of headlights swung slow across my front window and stopped, pointed straight at my house. I knew that car. Even in the dark, even through the frost on my window, I knew the shape of my son's headlights. He had pulled all the way up into my driveway, close and aggressive, the way a man parks when he wants you to know he is angry. I did not turn on the porch light. I did not go to the door. I sat still in my dark living room, and I reached over to the side table, and I picked up the little digital recorder Ramon had given me 2 days before. Carry it everywhere, he had said. You never know when they will hand you a gift.
I pressed the button. A tiny red light came on, and then went dark, the way it does when it is running. I set it on the arm of the chair, and I waited. The pounding started a few seconds later. Not a knock. Fists, both of them, hammering on my front door, hard enough to rattle the storm glass in its frame. "Dad," Jagger's voice muffled and wild. "Dad, I know you are in there. Your car is right here. Open this door." I did not move. I did not make a sound. "Samson?" That was Araceli, now her voice climbing higher and sharper than his. "Open this door, right now! You cannot hide from us in there, you coward!" They pounded for what felt like a long time. The doorframe groaned. I sat in my chair, my hands folded, and I let them wear their arms out on the door. My Eva used to hang her Christmas wreath on. And as they screamed, I stayed quiet, because a quiet man on the far side of a door will make a frightened person say things they should never say out loud. "You are going to die alone in that house," Jagger shouted. "You know that. Alone? No family, no nobody, just your money and your tools. Is that what you want? Give us what is ours." "He is not going to answer," I heard Araceli hiss low, thinking the door was thick enough to hide her. "Fine, then we do it the other way. I will tell them he put his hands on me. I will walk into that police station with a bruise and tell them Samson Holmes attacked me. And who do you think they believe? Jagger, the sweet young mother, or the bitter old man who will not help his own son? I will end him." I went very still in the dark. She had just said it. Out loud. On my porch, 3 feet from a running recorder. She was going to fake an injury and swear out a false assault charge against me, put a hand on the Bible, and lie me into a cage. And she was so sure of her own cleverness, so drunk on her own panic, that she said the whole plan into the winter air for the machine to catch. "Do you hear me, old man?" she screamed at the door, pounding once more. "You want to see what I can do to you? Keep hiding. Keep saying no. You will find out." And as I sat there in the dark, listening to my daughter-in-law promise to destroy me, and my own son standing right beside her saying nothing, doing nothing to stop her, I felt the last thread that still tied me to the boy I raised go slack and then snap clean through. It did not hurt the way I thought it would. It just let go. Because standing there behind that door, I finally understood that the man on my porch was not a good son led astray by a bad woman. He was not a fool who had gotten in over his head. He was every bit her equal, her partner, and he had been for a long time. I had told myself a comforting story about my son for years, the way a father does, patching over the cracks, repainting the rot. But you cannot maintain a thing that is rotten all the way to the core. Sooner or later, the truth of it shows through, no matter how many coats you put on top. The pounding on my door had stopped. I came back to myself in the dark living room, and I realized the house had gone quiet again. I got up stiff and looked out the edge of the window. Their car was backing out of my driveway, tires spinning on the ice. Araceli was in the passenger seat, her hands moving fast in the air, screaming at Jagger about something. He hit the steering wheel with the flat of his hand. They looked like exactly what they were now, with the mask off. 2 cornered, frightened animals snapping at each other in the dark, because the trap was closing and they could feel it, and did not yet know whose foot was in it. I watched the red taillights shrink down the street and disappear into the snow. I picked up the recorder from the arm of the chair. The little light was still glowing steady. I stopped it, and I played back the last few seconds just to be sure. And there it was, clear as a bell. Araceli's own voice, laying out her plan to frame me for a crime. I saved the file, and I named it what it was. Threat to file false report. Then I sent it down the line to Robert Buck with a single sentence. She just told me exactly who she is. But I did not go to bed. I sat back down in the dark, and I let the memory that had come knocking finally come all the way in. Because that recording was not the first time my son had stood in a room and shown me the empty place where his heart should have been. The first time was 5 years ago, in a hospital on the last night of his mother's life. And I had never told a single living soul what he did. It was the middle of March 5 years ago, and the snow that year would not quit. Eva had been at university hospitals for 11 days. The cancer had started in her pancreas, the worst place for it to start, because by the time it tells you it is there, it has already made its plans. We caught it late. We fought it hard. And on that 11th day, the young doctor with the kind eyes sat down on the edge of her bed and told us it was time to stop fighting and start saying the things we needed to say. I did not leave that room after that. I slept in the chair, or not at all. Eva drifted in and out, and when she was awake, I held her hand and we talked. And when she slept, I counted the seconds between each breath and prayed to a God I was not sure was listening to make the gaps smaller. On the last night, she slipped down into a deeper place and did not come back up. Her breathing changed, slow and rough, the kind the nurses have a quiet word for. They told me it would be hours now, not days. I pulled my chair as close as it would go, took her hand in both of mine, put my forehead against her knuckles, and talked to her. I told her about the day I first saw her at the church social in 1979, in a yellow dress, laughing at something her friend said. I told her the hydrangeas would come up blue again in June, and that she was the finest thing that ever happened to a rough man like me. And that was when the door opened, and my son came in. I looked up, my face wet, glad, in spite of everything, that he had come, glad that Eva would have her boy near her at the end. He stopped a few feet inside the door, and even from there, in that dim room, I could smell the beer on him. "Dad," he said. He did not look at his mother. He looked at me. "Hey, I got your message." "Come sit with her son," I said. "Come hold her hand. She can still hear you." He shifted his weight from one foot to the other, glanced at the shape of her under the blanket, and then his eyes slid away like it cost him to look. "Yeah, in a minute," he said. "Listen, Dad, I hate to bring this up right now, but I have to because after, it gets complicated. That life insurance, the policy Mom took out a couple years back, did she ever finish signing it? Is it active? Because if it pays, I'm going to need my share pretty quick. I got into a thing, I owe some guys, and the timing is kind of, I want you to hear me clearly because I have carried this for 5 years and never once said it out loud. My wife had maybe an hour of breath left in her body, and her only child stood at the foot of her deathbed, asking whether her dying had cleared the paperwork yet, so he could pay off a gambling debt. I do not remember deciding to stand up. I just remember letting go of Eva's hand, which I had not released in 2 days, crossing that room, taking Jagger by the front of his jacket in both fists and walking him backward until his shoulders hit the wall. I put my face close to his, my hands shaking, and I said low so it would not reach the bed, "Get out. Get out of this room right now before I do a thing in front of your mother she would never forgive me for. Get out." He looked at me like I was the crazy one. "Jesus, Dad," he said, straightening his jacket. "I am just being practical." And he turned and walked out, and the door sighed shut behind him. I went back to the chair. I took Eva's hand again, and I made myself slow my hammering heart, made myself soft again, because I did not want the last of me she felt to be the anger. She was gone within the hour, just me and her and the snow at the window. I felt the moment she left. There is no mistaking it. The hand you are holding is holding you back, and then it simply is not. Jagger did not come back that night. He did not come to say goodbye to his mother. I sat with her until the sun came up over the lake, and he was not there. He came by the house the following week. I thought, God help me, that he was coming to grieve with his father, to sit in the kitchen and remember her. He stood on my porch,
the same porch he would pound his fists on 5 years later. And the first thing out of his mouth, before hello, before I am sorry, was, "Hey, Dad, did the insurance check come yet?" I closed the door in his face. It was the only time in my life I ever did that to my son. It would not be the last. So when Robert Buck asked whether I was ready to be the man who put my son in prison, what nobody knew was that my son had died for me years before, in a hospital room over a life insurance policy, while his mother took her last breath 10 feet away. The man suing me now was just wearing his skin. I came back to myself in the dark living room, the recorder cold in my hand, my face wet again after 5 dry years. And I understood I was not doing this for revenge. I was doing it for the old people whose savings that woman stole, and for Eva, so that nothing more of what we built would ever pass through the hands of the boy who could not be bothered to hold hers at the end. I wiped my face. I stood up. And I went to bed. And I slept. Finally. All the way through. Till morning. The next morning, I drove downtown and laid it all out for Robert Buck. The recording, the threat to frame me, the whole plan Araceli had screamed into the cold 3 feet from a running machine. Robert listened to it twice, sitting perfectly still, and when it finished, he took off his glasses and set them on the desk very carefully, the way a man does when what he really wants is to throw something. "Samson," he said, "in 40 years of practicing law, I have rarely been handed a gift like this. She has confessed on tape to conspiracy to file a false police report. That is a felony all by itself, before we ever get to the money." He leaned back. "Now, here is where it gets interesting, and here is where I need you to be a better actor than you have ever been in your life." I waited. "They are cornered," Robert said. 9 days from that audit, now 7. The bank accounts are frozen, the house fell through, every plan they had has died except one. Suing you. So they are going to be desperate to settle, to get cash in hand before that audit opens the books. And a desperate person who thinks they are winning will say things a careful person never would. He tapped the desk. "I want to give them a settlement meeting. I want you to call your son, and I want you to sound beaten. I want you to sound like a scared, lonely old man who cannot take the shame anymore and just wants his family back. I want you to tell him you are ready to pay." And then, Robert said, "we get them in a room. We get them talking. We let them tell us, on the record, exactly what this money really is. Because if we can get them to admit there was never any promise, never any contract, that this is just money they are squeezing out of you, then the whole lawsuit collapses and everything under it comes into the daylight." I understood. It was the same thing I used to do before a demolition. You do not just swing at a building, you study it. You find the one beam holding all the weight and you set your charge there, and you let the whole thing bring itself down. So that afternoon I sat down at my kitchen table and I made myself into the man they wanted me to be. I called Jagger. He let it ring 4 times, making me wait, a little power game, before he picked up. "What?" he said. "No hello." I let my breath shake. It was not hard. I just thought about that hospital room. "Jagger," I said, and I made my voice small and tired. "It is your father." "I know who it is. If you are not calling to say you will sign, I am hanging up." "Wait," I said. "Please, son, I cannot do this anymore. The neighbors, they will not look at me. The church, everybody thinks I am some kind of monster. I am an old man. I do not want to die with my own boy hating me and the whole world believing lies about me." I let the words crack in the middle. "I want to stop. I want to make it right. I am ready to pay." There was a silence on the line, and in that silence I could hear it, the sound of a predator going still because it smells blood. When Araceli's voice came muffled in the background, I knew I had him. "You are ready to settle,
Jagger said, slowly tasting it. The full amount, $250. Yes, I said, but not over the phone. I need to look you in the eye, son. I need to know that if I do this, it truly ends, that you will never come at me again. I need us to sit down like men. We can do that, he said too fast, now greedy. Tomorrow, my lawyer's office. You come alone. And Dad, do not bring that lawyer of yours. If I see Buck, the deal is off, and we go right back to the internet. I will come alone, I lied. Just me, I promise. I hung up and I sat there a moment. And then I straightened my back, and the frightened old man melted right off me. Because he had never been real. I opened the drawer of the kitchen table and took out the little recorder. I set it on the table next to my checkbook, and I looked at the two of them side by side. Then I opened the checkbook, and I uncapped my pen, and I wrote it out slow and careful. Pay to the order of Jagger Holmes, $250,000 and no cents. I signed my name at the bottom, Samson Holmes. In the same hand I had signed 40 years of paychecks and permits, and 1 marriage license. It was the prettiest lie I ever wrote. Because down in the corner, in the little box for the date, I did not write tomorrow's date. I wrote a date 30 years out, a date I would be almost 100 years old, a date that would bounce that check straight into next century. They could frame it, they could not cash it. I put the check in my shirt pocket. I put the recorder beside it. And then I went to the front closet and took down the one thing I would need to sell the whole performance. Eva's old wooden cane. The one she used at the very end that I had never been able to give away. It leaned in the corner where she left it. I picked it up, and it was light in my hand, and I did not need it. My legs were strong. But a beaten old man needs a cane. Tomorrow they would look across that table and see exactly what they expected to see. A defeated father, leaning on a dead woman's cane, come to hand over his life. They would not see the wrench in my other hand until the whole thing came down. I did not sleep much that night, but it was not the sleeplessness of worry. It was the old feeling from my working years, the night before a big pour, when the trucks were scheduled and the forms were set, and all that was left was to do the thing right. A calm kind of awake. Before dawn, I got up and I dressed for the part. Not my good suit. A suit says a man has come to do business, and I did not want them thinking. I put on a pair of tan work slacks, gone soft and loose at the knee, and a brown cardigan Eva had knitted me a lifetime ago, with a little moth hole near the pocket that I had never had the heart to mend. In the mirror, I looked exactly like what they wanted. An old man who fed the birds and forgot where he set his glasses. Harmless. Finished. Then I taped the recorder to my chest. Ramon had shown me how. High up under the cardigan, tucked against my undershirt, where a hand shaking mine or even a hand grabbing my collar would not find it. He gave me a fresh one, smaller than the last, no bigger than a book of matches. 12 hours of battery, he said. It hears a whisper across a room. Just keep your keys and your change out of that pocket. The jingle ruins the sound. I pressed the button. The little light blinked once and went dark. Running. I said a few words to test it. My own name, the date. And I played it back, and my voice came out of that little machine clear as church bells. Good. I put the poison check in my shirt pocket over my heart. I took Ava's cane from the corner by the door, and I stood in my own front hall for a moment in the gray light coming through the frosted glass, and I said a short word to her. Not out loud, just in the place where I keep her. Ride with me today, old girl. We are going to go get our house back. The office of Jagger's lawyer was in a tired strip mall out on the east side, wedged between a nail salon and a place that cashed checks and lent money at wicked rates. The sign over the door read, Dale Whitfield, Attorney at Law, and one of the letters in Whitfield had burned out, so it just said, Dale W. Whitfield.
which told me most of what I needed to know about the man before I ever shook his hand. I parked my old sedan at the far end of the lot, away from the two cars I knew. Jagger's leather-seated German thing and Araceli's leased white Lexus, both parked crooked and close, taking up more room than they had any right to. I sat for a moment and let the engine tick as it cooled. I pressed my hand flat against my chest and felt the small, hard shape of the recorder under the wool, and felt my own heart going slow and steady beneath it. Then I became the old man. I let my shoulders round forward. I let my chin drop. I took Eva's cane in my right hand, and I leaned my weight onto it as I climbed out of the car, and I shuffled across that icy parking lot, slow and careful, a beaten old widower coming to pay his ransom. Every step I felt the cane bite into the salt-crusted asphalt. Every step I heard Eva's voice the way she used to tease me. "Samson Holmes, you are the worst liar the good Lord ever made." Maybe so, Eva. But not today. Today I was going to be the best liar in the state of Ohio for you. I pushed through the glass door into a waiting room that smelled of burnt coffee and old carpet. There was no receptionist, just a row of plastic chairs and a fake plant and a closed inner door with a nameplate hanging slightly crooked. Behind that door, I could hear voices low and urgent, the sound of people rehearsing a thing they did not want to get wrong. I knocked once with the head of the cane. The voices stopped dead. "Come in," Jagger called out, and there was a strain in his voice. A wire pulled too tight. I turned the knob and I stepped inside, leaning hard on Eva's cane, my head down, an old man come to the end of his fight. The room was small and close, a cheap laminate desk. Behind it sat a heavy-set man in a shiny gray suit and a tie too wide for this decade. Dale Whitfield himself. Sweating already, though the room was cold, and across from him, in two chairs pulled close together, sat my son and his wife. Araceli was dressed like she was going to a gala. White blazer, gold at her ears and her throat, her chin lifted, her eyes bright and hard and certain. She looked at me, and I watched something ugly and satisfied move behind her face. She thought she was watching a man walk into his own grave. Jagger would not look at me at all. He was pale, and there was a sheen of sweat on his forehead, and his knee was bouncing under the table fast, the way it used to when he was a boy who had done something and knew I was about to find out. "You are late," Araceli said. She did not say hello. She never did. "My eyes," I said in a small, cracked voice, lowering myself slow into the empty chair, laying Eva's cane across my knees. "I do not drive so good in the winter anymore." I looked up at the two of them, and I let my old face tremble. "Let us get this over with," I said. "I am tired. I just want my family back." Whitfield cleared his throat and shuffled some papers into a stack. "Well," he said, "that is good to hear, Mr. Holmes. My clients want this resolved too, amicably." He slid a thin document across the desk toward me, 3 pages, stapled. "This is a standard settlement and release. You agree to pay the plaintiffs $250,000, and in exchange, they dismiss the suit with prejudice, meaning they can never bring this claim again. There is also a confidentiality clause. Nobody speaks of this, ever." I picked it up with a trembling hand, and I held it far from my face and squinted at it, an old man fighting his eyes. "I brought my checkbook," I said softly. I patted my shirt pocket. "Good," Araceli said, and she leaned forward. The predator could not help herself. "You can write it now. A cashier's check would have been cleaner, but we will take a personal check if the funds clear right away." I nodded, slow-beaten. I reached into my pocket and took out the checkbook, and I laid it on the desk, and I uncapped my pen with fingers that shook just enough. I looked down at the amount line. I let a long silence stretch out. Then I set the pen down. "There is just one thing troubling me," I said. "My accountant. He told me I have to be careful how I do this. For the taxes." Araceli's eyes narrowed a fraction. "What about the taxes? You have the money." "Well," I looked up at her and then at Whitfield, all confusion and worry. "In the lawsuit, it says this money is for work, consulting. It says I owe it to Jagger for a contract for services. And my accountant, he tells me if I pay a man for services, that is income. Jagger would have to declare it, pay tax on it, federal, state, self-employment, all of it. He says that could be 35, 40%. I watched it land. I watched Araceli do the arithmetic behind her eyes. The same arithmetic she did on those old clients' accounts. 250,000 minus 40% was 150. 150,000 did not cover what she had stolen. It did not come close. If Uncle Sam took his bite first, they would still be short, still exposed, still headed for a cell when that audit opened. That is not, Araceli started and then stopped herself. And there is the other thing, I went on, gentle and old man, just thinking out loud. If I pay it as a contract, my accountant says I have to file a form with the government, a 1099, report that I paid Jagger, and since Jagger never declared getting any money from me before, the government might wonder about that. They might look at his taxes. They might look close. I let that sit. I would hate to bring that kind of attention down on my own son. The color drained clean out of Jagger's face. Whitfield tugged at his too wide tie. No, Araceli said sharply. No, there cannot be any of that. No forms, no government looking at anything. She caught herself again too late, and I saw Whitfield glance at her, a flicker of unease crossing his sweaty face. Well now, I said, there might be another way. My accountant mentioned it. I paused, and I let them lean in, all three of them, toward the solution I was dangling. If this money is not for work, if it is not a contract at all, if I just give it to my son, as a gift. A gift, Whitfield said slowly. A gift, I agreed. Under the law, a man can give his family a gift. I pay the gift tax myself out of my own pocket. Jagger owes nothing, declares nothing. No income, no 1099, no government looking at his accounts. He gets the whole 250,000 clean and quiet. I watched the relief break across Jagger's face like sunrise. He did not care what they called it. He did not care about his own dignity, or the lie, or his dead mother's memory. He cared about the cash, whole and untaxed and untraceable. Do that, he said quickly. Yeah, make it a gift. But son, I turned my old trembling face to him, and I let my voice go soft and sad. You understand what that means. If it is a gift, then there was no contract. It means I never promised you anything. It means the things in that lawsuit about the dinner, about the caretaking, the consulting, none of that was ever true. It was just money you needed, and I am giving it to you because you are my boy. The whole room went still, and I held my breath because this was the beam. This was the one that held all the weight. If they stepped on it, the building came down. Jagger did not even hesitate. Who cares what it is, he said. Call it a gift, call it whatever you want. There was no contract, fine, whatever. Just sign the check, Dad. But I was not looking at Jagger anymore. I had turned my head slow to look at Araceli, because she was the smart one. She was the one who might yet feel the floor shift under her feet. I need to hear it from you too, I said, still soft, still small. I am an old man. I get confused. I need to know we are all agreed, so nobody says something different later. Is this a gift, Araceli, or do I truly owe this money on a contract? She looked at me, and for one held breath, I thought she saw it. I thought the animal in her smelled the trap. Her eyes flicked to the recorder she could not see, to the cane to my trembling hands searching. But greed is louder than instinct. And she needed that untaxed money more than she needed to be careful. It is a gift, Araceli said, and her voice was tight and impatient. There was no contract. We made that part up to get your attention, because you would not help your own family any other way. Are you happy now you made us say it? It is a gift. Now, write the check. There it was. The beam gave way. I sat very still for one more second, letting her words settle into the little machine over my heart. No contract. We made it up. It is a gift. She had just burned her own lawsuit to the ground and did not even know she was holding the match. I want to be sure I understand, I said, and I let just a little of the old strength come back into my voice, testing it like a man putting weight on a leg that has been asleep. You were telling me, right here in front of your lawyer, that the lawsuit you filed with the county court is false, that there was no promise, that you swore to things in that complaint that never happened, and you are demanding this money from me right now under threat of dragging my name through more mud.
Do I have that right?
Yes, Jagger snapped, standing up out of his chair. Yes, it was a lie. We needed the money. Everybody lies. Now stop dragging this out and pay us before I lose my patience. I sat there for one heartbeat longer. I felt the recorder warm against my chest. I had it all. The false lawsuit, the admission of perjury, the extortion right out of their own mouths in front of a witness who happened to be their own attorney. So I stopped being the old man. I sat up straight in that cheap chair. My shoulders came back. My chin came up. The tremble went out of my hands all at once, and I set Eva's cane aside, leaned it against the desk, and I did not need it, because my legs were as strong as they had been at 40. I watched the confusion cross Whitfield's sweating face as the frail old widower in front of him simply stood up and became a different man entirely, tall and steady and cold. Thank you, I said, and my voice filled that little room low and clear, and nothing like the cracked whisper of a minute before. Thank you for confirming in front of your own lawyer that your lawsuit is a fraud. And thank you for admitting that you are trying to extort $250,000 out of your own father. Araceli's face went white. What? She said. What did you? I reached up under the brown cardigan Eva had knitted me, and I peeled the tape off my chest, and I drew out the little recorder and held it up between two fingers. The red light was blinking steady and patient, the way it had been the whole time. Every word, I said. I have got every word. The silence in that room was total. And then it broke all at once. You set us up, Araceli screamed, and she came up out of her chair so fast it toppled over backward and clattered against the wall. You lying old... You set us up. She lunged across that desk at me, her painted nails going for my face. All the gala polish gone, nothing left but the cornered animal underneath. Whitfield caught her around the middle. Araceli, no, sit down, do not. He was shouting, hauling her back while she kicked and clawed at the air. I did not flinch. I did not step back. I stood there steady as a foundation, and I reached into my shirt pocket and I took out the check, the beautiful poison check, and I laid it flat on the desk in front of my son. You wanted a check, I said. There it is. $250,000. You might want to look at the date. Jagger snatched it up. His eyes went to the corner, to the little box, and I watched him read it, and I watched his face fall apart. This, he said, this is dated 30 years from now. You can cash it when I am 96, I said, which, according to your wife, should be any day now. Until then, son, it is a worthless piece of paper, same as your lawsuit. Araceli let out a sound that was not a word and threw herself against Whitfield's grip. And one more thing, I said, and now I let it come. All of it, cold and even and final. I know about Meridian. I know about the audit that starts in 6 days. I know about the $215,000 you have been stealing from old people who trusted you, people my age, people who worked their whole lives, just like I did. I looked at my son, who had gone gray as ash. And I know about the accounts you signed your name to, Jagger. 4 of them. Jagger sank back down into his chair like his strings had been cut. He put his face in his hands. And my son, 37 years old, began to cry right there in that shabby office the same way he used to cry in my kitchen when he had broken something too big to fix. I picked up Eva's cane. I did not need it, But it was hers, and I was not going to leave it in that room with these people. "Counselor," I said to Whitfield, who stood there frozen, still holding a struggling Araceli, "I would find out real quick who is paying your fee, because that money is stolen, and I will see all of you in court on Monday." I turned and walked to the door, straight and tall. "You cannot do this!" Araceli was shrieking behind me. "You cannot!" I did not turn around. "I already did," I said, and I walked out into the cold, clean winter air, and behind me, I could hear them starting to turn on each other. And it was the finest sound I had heard in 5 long years. The Cuyahoga County Courthouse is a heavy old building of gray stone, and on Monday morning it smelled the way those places always smell, of floor wax and cold radiators and the nervous sweat of people who know they have done something wrong. I wore my good charcoal suit this time, not to do business, as armor. I sat at the defense table beside Robert Buck with my hands folded in front of me, still and calm, a man made of poured concrete. Across the aisle sat Jagger and Araceli, with Dale Whitfield between them, and the 3 of them looked like they had not slept since I walked out of that strip mall office. Whitfield had tried to withdraw from the case on Friday, Robert told me, citing a breakdown in communication with his clients. The judge had denied it. It was too late. Whitfield was captaining a boat that was already underwater, and he knew it. Jagger's knee was going under the table, that same old bounce. Araceli sat rigid, her makeup laid on heavy over the dark circles, her eyes fixed on nothing. And in the second row behind them sat Simon Roberts and Livia Klein, her mother and father, dressed for church, clutching their pocketbooks, ready to climb up on that stand and swear to a pack of lies about a dinner that never happened. The bailiff called us to order. "All rise." Judge Clayton Wheeler came in through the door behind the bench, and I knew inside of 10 seconds that this was a serious man. He was tall and lean, near 70, with close-cut gray hair and a face carved from the same stone as the building. He had a reputation, Robert had told me. He had spent 30 years on that bench, and if there was one thing on this earth Clayton Wheeler could not abide, it was a person who came into his courtroom and lied. He settled into his chair, looked out over his glasses at the 2 tables, and told counsel to proceed. Whitfield went first, and I will give the man this, he tried. He stood up and he smoothed his wide tie, and he walked out in front of that courtroom, and he told the story they had built. He told it about a hard-working young man named Jagger, who had given his father years of devoted help and honest counsel. He told it about a solemn promise made at a family dinner, a father's word given and then broken out of spite and greed. He pointed one thick finger across the aisle at me, at the old man in the charcoal suit, and he called me a wealthy miser who would rather see his own son lose everything than part with money he did not need. I did not blink. I did not look away. I just watched him steady and let him build his house of straw as high as he wanted. Then they called their witnesses. This was their whole case now, these 2. Livia Klein went up first, laid her hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth. Then she sat down and told nothing but lies. She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, and she said yes, she had been there at the dinner 4 years ago, at Samson's own home. She said she had heard Samson raise a glass and promised Jagger a share of his retirement, $250,000 for all the boy had done. She said it had warmed her heart to see it. She was a good liar. She had practiced, and the whole time she spoke I sat still as stone. Because I knew something Livia Klein did not. I knew that I had never once in 31 years had that woman inside my home. I knew that 4 years ago, on the date she was describing, I had been sitting alone in my kitchen with a cup of coffee, because I do not throw parties, and I especially did not throw one to celebrate a pension I had not yet even decided how to spend. Robert had the proof of all of it in the folder in front of him, waiting. So I let her talk. I let her build the noose. When Whitfield finished with her, Robert stood. "No questions for this witness, Your Honor," he said, and sat back down. I saw the flicker of confusion on Livia's face. She had braced herself for a fight, for a cross-examination, for a chance to dig in deeper. And Robert had just told the whole courtroom without saying it that her testimony was so worthless it did not merit the effort of a single question. Simon Roberts went up next and told the same rehearsed story almost word for word, and Robert let him go too. No questions. Let them think we had nothing. Whitfield stood and cleared his throat. The plaintiffs rest, Your Honor. The courtroom was quiet. A few of the jurors were looking at me, and I could see it in their faces, some sympathy for the poor young couple, some doubt about the cold old man who would not even defend himself. The lie had done its work on them, the same way it had done its work on my church, on my neighbors, on Eva's own sister. The story was good. If I had been in that jury box, not knowing what I knew, I might have believed it too. But the story was only half told. Judge Wheeler looked over at our table. Mr. Buck, is the defense ready to proceed? Robert Buck rose to his feet, slow and heavy, buttoning his jacket over that belly. An old country lawyer who looked like he might ask for directions to the courthouse he was already standing in. He let the silence stretch just long enough. Then he turned and he looked straight across the aisle at the plaintiff's table. The defense calls Jagger Holmes to the stand. The air went out of the room. Jagger had not expected this. He had thought he could sit behind his lawyer and let the old people lie for him and never have to open his own mouth. He looked at Whitfield, and Whitfield gave a small, helpless nod, because there was nothing else he could do. You cannot refuse to let a plaintiff be questioned in his own lawsuit. Jagger stood up on legs that did not want to hold him. He walked to the stand. He laid his shaking hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth, so help him God. And I watched my son take that oath. And I thought about all the things a man swears and does not keep. Robert Buck did not pounce. He ambled up to the stand, slow and friendly, like he was going to ask my boy about the weather. Mr. Holmes, he said, you just heard your mother-in-law testify that you were all together at a dinner at your father's home 4 years ago, where this promise was made. You were there that night. Yes, Jagger said. His voice came out thin. You are sure you were physically present in that house on that evening? Yes, I was there. Robert nodded, easy, agreeable. He walked back to our table and picked up a slim folder, and the friendliness went out of him the way heat goes out of a room when a door opens onto winter. That is strange, Robert said, because these are the records for the account they claim you consulted on. And these, he held up a second stack, are your own tax filings, which we obtained by court order. He turned to the judge. Your Honor, permission to approach the witness? Granted. Robert laid a sheet of paper in front of my son. Mr. Holmes, this is your federal tax return for the year of this supposed dinner, the year you claim you were working as your father's consultant, earning the money he supposedly promised you. Would you read the court the figure you reported as your income that year? It is right there on the line I have marked. Jagger looked at the paper. His mouth opened and nothing came out. I can read it for you, Robert said gently. 0. You reported $0 of income that year, Mr. Holmes. Not 1 cent. He set down another page. And this is an application you signed that same year for state unemployment benefits. On it, under penalty of perjury, you swore that you were unemployed, that you had no source of income, and that you were unable to find work. You collected $430 a week for 5 months on that sworn statement. The courtroom had gone dead silent. Jagger was staring at the papers like they were snakes. Robert straightened up, and his voice, when it came, filled the whole room. So here is my difficulty, Mr. Holmes. In this lawsuit, you have sworn to a judge that you spent that year working hard as your father's paid consultant. But in these government documents, you swore also under oath that you were unemployed with no income at all. Both of those things cannot be true. He leaned in. So which time were you lying? Were you lying to the state of Ohio to collect benefits you were not owed? Or are you lying to this court right now to take $250,000 from your own father? Because one of those is welfare fraud, and the other is perjury. And son, you do not get to pick. Neither. Jagger's eyes went to Araceli. It was instinct, a drowning man reaching for the person who pushed him in. But Araceli was staring straight ahead at the wall, her jaw set, her hands folded, and she did not turn to look at him. She had already let go. She was cutting the weight loose so it would not drag her down with it. And I watched my son understand in real time that the woman he had betrayed his own father for would not spend 1 ounce of herself to save him.
Jagger said, I need to.
Answer the question, Judge Wheeler said from the bench, and his voice was quiet and terrible. Were you working, Mr. Holmes, or were you not?
I was not working, Jagger whispered.
Louder, the judge said. For the record.
I was not working, Jagger's voice cracked. There was no consulting. I did not do any of that.
So there was no contract, Robert said. No promise, no work, no basis at all for this lawsuit you filed against your father. Jagger was crying now, that same broken, hitching cry, in front of the whole courtroom. No, he said, there was no contract. I watched him from the defense table, and I will not stand here and tell you my heart felt nothing. A father does not get to switch that off entirely, no matter what the son has done. Some small, stubborn corner of me still saw the boy on the bicycle wobbling down Larchmere with me running behind. But I made myself look past that boy to the man who had stood over his dying mother asking about insurance money.
The man who had pounded my door and stood silent while his wife swore to frame me for a crime.
And when I looked at that man, the small, stubborn corner went quiet, and what was left was steady.
The gallery stirred. One of the jurors sat back hard in her seat, and Robert Buck, without a flicker of mercy, turned to the judge.
Your Honor, the defense would move at this time to dismiss. But before we do, we have one further piece of evidence to present, and it does not concern this witness. He turned and looked for the first time directly at my daughter-in-law. It concerns the co-plaintiff, Mrs. Araceli Holmes, and the true source of the money these two have been so desperate to get their hands on.
Araceli's head came up at last, and for the first time since I had known her, that cold, certain face showed something underneath the polish. It showed fear. Araceli was on her feet before Whitfield could stop her.
Your Honor, this is harassment, she said, and just like that, the tears came right on cue, a performance she had clearly given before. She pressed a tissue to the corner of her eye. This man and his lawyer are trying to destroy me because I stood by my husband. I am an honest woman. I work hard. I have never done anything wrong in my life, and I will not sit here and be attacked by a bitter old man who will not help his own family. Judge Wheeler watched her over the top of his glasses. He did not look moved. He looked like a man waiting for a dog to finish barking. Are you finished, Mrs. Holmes? He asked. She dabbed her eyes.
I just want this to stop, Your Honor.
Sit down. He turned to Robert. Mr. Buck, you said you have evidence concerning this plaintiff. Present it.
Robert lifted a large, sealed envelope from our table. It was heavy, and across the front of it was a printed seal I could read even from where I sat. Federal Bureau of Investigation, Financial Crimes.
Your Honor, Robert said, this is a certified forensic report prepared by the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. It was delivered to us pursuant to a subpoena issued to the compliance office of Meridian Wealth Partners, Mrs. Holmes's employer. He carried it to the bench and handed it up. I would direct the court's attention to the summary on the 3rd page.
Araceli had gone the color of the paper in that envelope. The word Meridian had landed on her like a bucket of ice water. Judge Wheeler put on his glasses. He opened the envelope, drew out the FIC report, and began to read. The courtroom was so quiet I could hear the old radiator ticking against the wall and the scratch of the court reporter's machine. Wheeler read one page. He turned to the next. His eyebrows drew down. He looked at a column of figures. He looked at a bank statement. And then he stopped, and he lifted his head, and he looked at my daughter-in-law with eyes gone cold as the lake in January.
Mrs. Holmes, the judge said, and his voice was very quiet now, which was worse than if he had shouted. Please stand.
Araceli rose.
Her legs did not want to hold her, and she gripped the edge of the table. You are employed as a senior financial advisor at Meridian Wealth Partners. You manage retirement accounts for elderly clients. Is that correct?
Yes, she whispered.
According to this report, the judge said, lifting a page, over the past 8 months, a series of unauthorized transfers were made from the accounts of your oldest clients, routed through holding companies, and into accounts controlled by you and your husband. The total taken comes to $215,000. He set the page down. And I have here, Mrs. Holmes, the complaint you filed against your father-in-law. In it, you demand $250,000.
He took off his glasses. $215,000 stolen, plus interest, plus the fees to make yourself whole before your firm's audit, plus the fee for that attorney sitting next to you. And it comes near as makes no difference to $250,000. Wheeler leaned forward over the bench. Is it your testimony, Mrs. Holmes, that it is a coincidence the amount you demanded from this man matches almost to the dollar the amount you needed to replace before you were caught?
Araceli's mouth opened. It is a mistake. There is an explanation.
It is not a mistake, the judge said, and his voice cracked out across that courtroom like a rifle shot. It is a scheme built on the back of a grieving widower. You stole from the old and the trusting, you got caught by a calendar. And you tried to use my court as a machine to launder the money and cover the theft. You used the law itself as a weapon. He reached down and pressed a button on his bench. A red light blinked beside the rear doors. The doors opened. 3 men in dark suits came down the center aisle, unhurried, the way men move when they know no one is going anywhere. They were not court bailiffs. Every eye in that room knew what they were. Araceli Holmes, the lead man said. You are under arrest for wire fraud, embezzlement, and money laundering. She came apart. It was not me, she screamed, and she spun and pointed a shaking finger straight at my son. It was him. It was Jagger. He has the gambling debts. He made me do it. He forced me. Jagger shot up out of his seat. You lying, it was your idea. You stole it. You moved it. I just signed what you told me to sign. The marshals did not care whose idea it was. One of them took Araceli by the arm and drew her hands behind her back, and the sound of the cuffs closing that hard mechanical ratchet was the loudest thing in the room. A second marshal turned to my son. Jagger Holmes, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud and money laundering. Jagger looked at me then. Across that whole courtroom, over the heads of the lawyers and the gasping gallery, my son looked at his father. And his face was the face of the little boy who broke the window and knew the belt was coming. Dad, he said, Dad, please, tell them I didn't know. I stood up slowly. I buttoned my charcoal jacket. And I looked my son in the eye for what I knew would be the last time in a long time. You knew, I said. You signed your name, same as always. And I watched them lead my son and his wife out of that courtroom in chains. I did not go to the sentencing. Robert went in my place and called me after. Araceli got 12 years in federal prison. The judge called her a predator who preyed on the elderly and used the courts as a getaway car. Jagger got 6 years for the conspiracy. He cried and said he was a victim, and no one believed him because he had run clean out of people willing to, myself first among them. Araceli filed for divorce from a jail cell and testified against him to shave time off her own sentence. Everything I could have told my son about that woman, he learned too late from the wrong end of her. I could not stay in that house after. It was not the neighbors, though plenty of them came around, sheepish once the truth got out. It was the house itself. Every room held a ghost. The kitchen, where I fed him oatmeal. The driveway, where I taught him to drive. The front door his fists had pounded on. A man cannot heal in a house that is a museum of everything he lost. So I sold it to a nice young couple, teachers, expecting their first. I dug up 3 of Eva's hydrangea bushes to take with me, left the rest for the young wife, and told her they come up blue in June and to feed them in spring. She promised she would. I moved south to a small town outside Savannah, Georgia, where the winters are soft and the air smells of salt and pine,
And a man my age who worked with his hands his whole life is not a curiosity, but a neighbor. I bought a little house with a porch that does not sag and a yard where I put Eva's hydrangeas in the ground. I bought a boat, nothing fancy, and most mornings I take her out and fish and think and let the sun do its slow work on the cold that had lived in me for years. I did not abandon the child. Little Adelie is with Aracelli's sister in Columbus, a decent woman, the one clean branch on that poisoned tree. I set up a trust the right way, with Robert holding the reins. It pays for her school, her clothes, her doctor, straight to the people who care for her, never a dollar into a hand that could waste it. She will want for nothing. And when she is grown, if she comes looking for the grandfather who made sure of it, she will find me on a porch in Georgia with a story about a grandmother who grew blue flowers. Then, 6 months after I moved, a letter came. It had the return address of a federal correctional institution and an inmate number where a name should be. I knew the handwriting. I sat on my porch in the warm evening with the letter in my lap and the cicadas singing in the pines, and I opened it. It was 3 pages, and it was everything I knew it would be. He was sorry, he wrote. Prison was hell. The food was bad, the nights long, he was afraid. He needed money for the commissary. He needed money for a lawyer to appeal. Aracelli had turned on him. She was a snake. I had been right all along. And near the end, buried in it, he wrote the words, "I am sorry, Dad." But even there, the next sentence was another ask. "Just $500 a month. It is nothing to you." I read it twice, and I understood my son was not sorry for what he had done. He was sorry that it had cost him. But there was not one line in those 3 pages asking after me, after my health, after whether the man he had tried to destroy was all right. Even in his sorrow, there was only ever the reaching hand. I sat there a long time as the light went out of the sky. I thought about how easy it would be. $500 a month is nothing to me. It would be the fatherly thing. And that right there was the whole trap I had lived inside his entire life. The belief that love means always catching him, that a father proves himself by the size of what he is willing to lose. But you cannot maintain a thing that keeps breaking itself on purpose. Some things you fix. And some things, when you keep fixing them, you only teach that they never have to stop breaking. I did not tear the letter up in anger. I folded it slow and neat, the way I fold everything. Then I walked down to the water in the last of the light, and I let it go into the outgoing tide, and I watched it drift away toward the sea, and I did not feel guilty. I felt light. I am Samson Holmes. I am 66 years old. I turned wrenches for 41 years, and I kept every receipt. And when they came for everything, I had that record, and one small machine over my heart gave me back my name, my peace, and my freedom. So let me leave you with what it cost me to learn. We are taught that a parent's love is measured in endless sacrifice that we must give until we are hollow to prove we love our children. But shielding a person from every consequence is not love. It is the slow building of a man who will one day hold the knife. My son did not need my money. He needed the accountability I stole from him every time I paid his way out. Real peace does not sit in a bank account. It sits in the courage to cut a rotten tie, even when it shares your blood, and to let a person face the ruin they built with their own 2 hands. Sometimes the only way to save yourself is to stop saving them. If dignity is worth more to you than any bond built on greed, if you have ever had to make the hardest choice a good heart can make, then reach up and hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. And tell me down in the comments where you are watching from tonight. An old man is grateful for the company. And I will see you next time.